Welcome back to Beyond the Blocks. Last week I was taking part in Roblox's 72-hour game jam called the Developer Challenge, and this week I wanted to tell you about the experience and why I think every developer, big or small, new or established, should take part in a game jam. But first, we're your hosts. I'm Adam.
I'm Anthony.
So Anthony, I know you've taken part in a game jam quite a while ago. This was my first game jam, so I was just going to kind of tell people what it was like, talk about the strategy. If you have like different takes, you can jump in as well. And I know you've also organised some hackathons and things. So just talking about all these kind of fun developer challenges that I think are really, really cool to take part in. And I wish I'd have taken part in this one sooner, to be fair. So I just want to give a bit of background. This is the Developer Challenge 2026. It is unfortunately over as I'm recording this because I took part in it. But this is a yearly challenge that's hosted by Roblox DevRel, Developer Relations. And this one is a 72-hour game jam. I think different flavours of game jam, different lengths exist out there. This one's 72 hours. So it was from like Friday night through to Monday night in UK time, Friday morning through to Monday morning in California. And I was surprised. This one, it's not that well advertised, I didn't think. But apparently in 2025, over 1,000 submissions were sent in. I can only imagine that's gone up for 2026. So pretty hot competition. And each of those are teams of like 1 to 5 people. So it could be a solo dev, could be a team of 5. My team was a team of 2. There was me doing programming and UI, and someone else doing the modeling and like textures for the models. So we didn't have anyone with animation specialty or sound specialty. So that probably influenced what we ended up going with. And then lastly, there's a theme that is kept secret and announced at the start of the challenge, which I think is quite cool because one of the big takeaways that I'll talk more and more about this, but the creativity and the fun of letting that creativity loose is one of the biggest takeaways that I had from this. And keeping that theme secret hopefully means that you're forcing at least some creation to happen during those 3 days.
What was the theme?
So the theme in the end was first contact. So that was quite an interesting theme. I'll talk a little bit more about kind of our prep before we knew that theme, and then like how we tweaked what we were going to do to fit that. But they tend to be these kind of broad themes that allow for interpretation. And that's part of the challenge, is how you interpret it as well. Last year's one in 2025 was break the system. So whatever that means to you. So I think that leads nicely onto the prizes and the winning categories, because there wasn't just one, or there isn't going to be just one winner for 2026. And there was, I think, 4 categories in 2025. They added a 5th one this time. So
is it AI?
It is. Good predict. How could you tell? Absolutely, it was AI. So there were these 5 judging categories, one of which is that new one, AI, and there's going to be a winner for each of these categories. And the winning team, every member in it gets a $1,500 gift card. So if you've got 2 members, $1,500 plus $1,500, $3,000 for your team, which is great. And I think the reason it's per member is because you could be a remote team. But obviously, if you know the person and you want to pool your stuff together, like that's a fantastic prize. So yeah, a global gift card that you can basically buy your local country's gift cards using that gift card. But yes, sorry, the themes. So we had most engaging experience. So how well the core loop maintains player interest. Best technical quality. So high quality assets, functional code, how well it is integrated. Most creative interpretation of the theme. So that was quite a big one. You can't really prep for that until you've heard the theme. Best use of interactive AI. So generative sort of 3D modeling, so the 4D generation, was one. Text to speech, speech to text, and text generation. Those were kind of your 4 tools that Roblox have released that you had to use for best use of interactive AI. And then the last one was most innovative gameplay, so just pushing the bounds of what's possible on Roblox. There's obviously overlap between those categories. If you have the most engaging, is that because it's innovative gameplay? Like, there's probably some overlap, but at least last year, each one was won by a single team. I don't know if you can win more than one, but each one was won by a single team. So the challenge here was, do you aim for all 5, or do you try and narrowly aim for 1 or 2 of these categories in the hope that you increase your chances? So I guess before I talk about my strategy, what would you go into that thinking if you had these 5 different ways to win?
I think the best strategy is don't go for all of them, but don't just go for one. Maybe like at least 2, maybe 3. I think the theme is quite broad, as they usually are. Sorry, remind me what the theme was again.
Theme for this one was first contact.
First contact. What does that even mean?
Well, I'll tell you what it means to me in a minute.
Okay.
But I think it meant different things to different people, which was quite interesting. And, most creative interpretation of the theme was interesting because you've kind of got to try and think, how would other people interpret it? Well, let's try and interpret it differently, which is tricky. But yeah, exactly that. We didn't aim for all 5. We sort of considered which ones were more or less likely. There was
I feel
a
like
lot
I'd
of
want to go for technical quality.
Technical quality. I feel
just
like
because,
for us
just because
that
that's what I'm
feels
passionate about.
attainable. Yeah.
And yeah, I think the creative interpretation of theme, I think you could probably you'd want to go for that no matter what.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's tricky. Like I say, that's probably the trickiest one to plan for in advance, is the only risk. So if you sort of were like, I'll ignore the others, we're just going to go for creative interpretation, and then it's a theme that you just absolutely don't know what to do with, it can be challenging. But yeah.
The thing with these events is we really don't want people to plan in advance, because then it kind of gives you a level playing field, right? If I think I recall some of my friends went to a hackathon last year and they came back telling me, oh, the winners just planned their thing 3 weeks in advance, and it's just because they released the theme. So I think it's good that the theme was kept secret.
Yeah, definitely. There was one that I've seen a cool trailer for and played that was a submission for this developer challenge, and you can tell that they were planning this and had probably worked on some part of it before the actual game jam, and you sort of look at it and think, how does that fit in with the theme? And you ask the developers and they're like, oh yeah, we weren't quite sure how to make it fit in the theme. And you're like, okay, well, someone's reverse engineered it. But yeah, the other thing we were thinking when we saw these categories is the AI one is interesting. Now, I haven't played around with many of the technologies that we're talking about for the AI one, but a lot of people would be either scared off by it or just not be interested in it, and therefore are fewer people going for that category. And does that increase your chances, if you do it well, of winning it? Versus if everyone's got the same theme, everyone's playing for most creative interpretation of the theme. So, you've got to balance that as well.
I have a thought about the AI one, and I feel like 4D generation is only a studio beta, right? So
they released the client beta
it's client
about
beta
2 or 3 days before this started, specifically for that
So
purpose.
does that need to be enabled, or is that just a beta anyone can use?
When it reaches client beta, anyone can see it. So it all that means is they might tweak it before full release.
I mean, that's a good one, because I mean, it's almost ignoring what it is. It's kind of fair because no one's really seen this technology before.
Yeah, exactly. No one's put it in front of players. They've maybe played around in studio. They maybe understand the APIs, but yeah, it would be the first chance. At most, you could have released it 2 or 3 days before on a different game, but that's about as good as you could do. And one of the rules here was that the experience that you create had to be created within the time frame. You could use pre-created assets, but you had to declare them all on the submission. So I assume that there'll be some sort of that will be taken into account in some way in the judging. If your entire thing was pre-made assets, I think you would maybe be penalised in some way. So yeah, I'll talk
interpretation. Yeah,
my interpretation. Well, I mean, before I do my interpretation, I'll tell you our prep and our principles of sort of how we were thinking going into it, and then sort of tell you what we thought when we saw that theme. So, as you say, we didn't want to prep too hard in advance, but we also didn't want to go into it completely, blank slate and sort of have to try and come up with something on the spot. So basically, our plan was come up with 3 to 5 rough ideas of kind of core gameplay loops that we could mold and extend upon based upon the theme. So some participants like to do sort of showcase pieces that maybe try out a new technology. Maybe they're one-player games because they don't want to try and do multiplayer, and they aren't focusing on a lasting or replayable experience. They just want to show some cool technology or push the limits. And I think that's a really, really cool use of it, and a great use of time. With us being our first game jam, we wanted to not quite play it safe, but we wanted to come out of this, we knew we might not win some of these categories, and we wanted to come out with something that we could then continue working on after the game jam and release as a full game if we wanted to. Sort of treat this as like our MVP, our beta test, where we pare it right down to the core mechanics and see if people like it. So that was kind of our plan. And to make use of Roblox's multiplayer platform, make use of the physics-based engine to kind of leverage Roblox. And that when you open a new place in Roblox, you have the default player controller, the default humanoids, and you have physics and you have multiplayer. And so it felt like, let's not fight against that. Let's use that to our advantage. So that was kind of our principle going in, and we came up with 5 ideas in the end. So I'll tell you our 5 ideas, and then I'll talk about how that ended up translating into what we produced for the theme. So our 5 ideas. Our first one was a sort of a bomb battle game. And what I mean by that is we had 2 different teams that were initially separated from each other on a map, and they would have to battle it out using bombs to destroy walls to get to each other, potentially attack each other, and it would kind of be round-based in some way. We weren't quite sure what the end goal would be, but we knew that it would be multiplayer and round-based, and that there would be, power-ups that you could get as well as just the bombs.
Is that inspired by that Minecraft game? I can't remember the name of it. Then there was a version of it, I think on Roblox it was called Bed Wars.
It wasn't inspired by that. I think there's probably similar concepts out there on round-based games that are everywhere, but sort of the destroying walls with bombs, it actually came from, my partner had a DS game that was like a 2D version of this from above, and I cannot remember the name of it now for the life of me, but you had to destroy walls, and it was a bit chaotic because there was sort of everyone was destroying everything all around, and we sort of thought, okay, let's turn that into 3D, let's put it on Roblox and make it multiplayer. How can we kind of adapt that? So that was an interesting one. That was really aiming for the engagement category of sort of replayability, because there was no end, right? It's just round based, and you would just play as many rounds as you could. Our next one was like a raft survival. Raft being like the kind of raft at sea, right? You've been stranded at sea and you're on a raft. And you have to collect resources that are maybe floating by. Maybe there's some sort of thing in the ocean. Is it a bit horror based? Is it a bit survival based? Not quite sure. And other players are doing the same. So multiplayer again. And there was this cool mechanic where maybe you could encounter other players at sea floating around, and you can choose to go up to them. Maybe you combine rafts and work together to survive and combine your resources, or maybe you go full pirate mode and try and steal their resources, destroy their raft, take it for your own, and be a bit selfish. And that felt like that. Again, there was unlimited gameplay because you could do this for a long time. Could be round based, could just be survival, 99 Nights style, like survive as long as you can, whatever it might be. But that felt like an interesting one. I realized after coming up with this that the game Raft exists, which apart from the multiplayer bit is basically this, but there's a shark in the water that's trying to get you. But yeah, we'd sort of reinvent this based on the theme as well. So that was our second idea. Our third idea was less fully formed and was just like, let's make a puzzle game. I want to make a puzzle game. The other person want to make a puzzle game. And it could be like a co-op puzzle where maybe you're both seeing different parts of the world. So, you know, one of you's like, stop, you're about to fall down a hole, and the other person doesn't see it. You're seeing two different realities, but you're in the same physical space. Or maybe something with like, I don't know, using physics where you can be big or small, and when you're big, you're heavy, you're strong. When you're small, you're light, and you can fit through things, and sort of having to solve puzzles in that way. So that was our third idea. I will say that that's quite a challenging thing to do. And spoiler, we didn't go with this one, because you're limited by how many puzzles you can create, and because we hadn't done a game jam before, how many puzzles can we create in 72 hours? Don't know. And so that there's potentially a risk that if you don't make enough, the player's done in 2 minutes and never plays your game again. So our third one was a bit of a build upon this idea of puzzle, but a hark back to the classic Roblox obby with a twist. And that twist would be that it wasn't just your parkour skills to get to the end, but some obstacles were impassable. You could not do it just with your character. And you need AI to come in and help you solve it, right? And so maybe you'd get to an incredibly tall wall and there's no way you'd ever jump it. And there's an ability for you to prompt and ask for something. What do you ask for? You might ask for a trampoline. Great idea. I might ask for a ladder, or someone might ask for a helicopter. I don't know. Like, you could ask for all sorts of different things. It would use the 4D generation. We'd have some predefined behaviors. So if you ask for something bouncy like a trampoline, the bouncy behavior gets added, you know, that sort of thing. So this was, if we decided to go for the AI category, an obstacle course that required AI was that idea. And I think that's really cool.
Did you foresee the AI category then? Or
so
was that already announced?
We saw the five categories in advance. We didn't see the theme. So you could sort of plan, you know, are we going for creativity? Are we going for AI? Are we going for technical quality? You could sort of decide where you wanted to spend your energy. And so this was our one AI at the core of the gameplay. That was that idea. And the very last one was sort of a last minute idea we had, which was going to be you're a light keeper. It's sort of puzzle, sort of obby. And so you had some kind of magic light that at the start of the game, maybe it revealed paths or it solidified objects. Later in the game, it might help you fight enemies or help you create the terrain, or, you know, sort of this light would change its purpose or its utility over time, and you'd have to use that to solve different puzzles, and the end would be like you'd find whatever resting place this light needs to be, I don't know, something along those lines. So it has the same downsides as some of the puzzles, but maybe you could be a bit more creative with the story for this one, and maybe you'd win on that front.
You sound very well prepared. I'm not sure how many people thought of as many ideas as you did, to be honest, but yes. I guess it's better to be over prepared than under prepared. I feel like I may have just not wanted to think about it, because then I'd have the best chance of getting the best theme idea if I just hadn't thought of, like, if I didn't have enough being biased to my mind, then I don't know. There are different strategies. What I'm interested in is that 72 hours. So obviously, yeah, you want to avoid anything that requires stupid amounts of repetitive assets to be viable. You need to limit your theme. You can't have, I don't know, you probably couldn't have rafts, bombs, and all of and an obby all together. You wouldn't have time. So that's something. How practical, or how was that organized at 72 hours? What time did you begin? And did you sleep? And how did you sort of organize that with your partner?
I did sleep. My partner basically was like, we are sleeping, we are eating. We will purchase food in advance so that we don't just order takeaway throughout the entire 72 hours. Our brains need to work to some degree, and if we just don't sleep, then you could end up with a very messy submission at the end of it because your mind's just not working. So going into it, we already knew that there was going to be sort of some Friday tasks. So for us, it was 6 p.m. on Friday that it started. So we knew there were going to be some Friday evening tasks, and that would be kind of get that core mechanic working. And as you say, you couldn't focus on too many different things. So each of these ideas maybe had like a core mechanic, and we would make that work on Friday. And then Saturday would be fleshing that out a bit more into the game. Maybe Sunday is sort of integrating what we've each been working on to kind of get it all together. And Monday, hopefully, would just be kind of debugging, adding the extra special sauce around it, maybe sound effects, other bits and pieces if we had time to do that. Again, foreshadow, that isn't quite how it went in terms of the time, but we tried our best. And so we had a Notion workspace with these 5 ideas, the 5 categories. We were ready for the theme, and we had like a to-do list that had Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and deferred for stuff that we'd push out of here. And as I mentioned, one of our principles was we wanted to try and create something that we could continue to use afterwards. So those deferred stuff didn't mean it would never happen, just it wasn't critical for the submission. So that was our plan. And going into it, I think there was maybe 3 things on that list, even before it started, which was title, thumbnail, and I think create the group that we were going to submit under. Like those were our like 3 tasks that by the end of the 72 hours, we must have completed those. But otherwise we left it pretty blank so that we did still have some creativity and could pivot based on what idea we ended up going with. But yeah, absolutely. Like I think I like to be in control of what's going on. The idea of not having any plan going into 72 hours was far too scary for me. And I think now that I've done one, I potentially would for a future one, just go in blind, because I think that could be even more fun. But we still had some good fun with it. So,
you mentioned with the submission, so you submitted at 6 p.m, I presume. And what do you submit?
Pretty close to 6 p.m.
With with judging as well, because I've just done over the same weekend, I was doing a hackathon and we had in-person judging, and each team had to present their project to about 5 or 6 different judges, depending on how many challenges they entered. At least 3 anyway, so they did a lot of presenting. But with over 1,000 submissions, I presume they're not going to be watching you speak. So do you just submit the link to the game and they just play it, or how does that work? And how can they test multiplayer?
So it's interesting. They obviously are trying to keep it anonymous who the judges are to stop any interference. In 2025, it took them just over 2 weeks between the end of the challenge and announcing the winners. So I imagine it'll be similar. I did do the maths. Some of these games, because I've tried out others, are story games, and you really don't get a sense of it until you play for at least 10 minutes. And 1,000 games for 10 minutes is insane, right? That's 10,000 minutes of playtime required, assuming one player. And as you say, there's multiplayer experiences. Ours, I'll talk a bit more about what we did in a moment, but ours required 2+ people in the server to play, which is a bit of a risk. But essentially, the judges are going to need to at least work in pairs to do some of these games. So I don't know how many there are. I'm hoping it won't be more than a few weeks. They haven't announced the winners as of recording this, as we only finished a few days ago. But to be honest, the winning for me was a good motivation, a good thing to aim towards. Having those categories was really helpful. But because of this kind of strategy we did of making something that we're proud of and that we can release as a proper game and that is playable at the end of the 72 hours, even if we don't win, I'm kind of happy with that because we had a good time. It was good fun. I suggest people do a game jam even if they don't think they're going to win. And if we win any of the categories, it'll be a nice surprise, and it'll be, you know, a really, really positive thing. But I wouldn't see a game jam as a failure if we didn't. So I don't mind too much waiting a few weeks if it if it takes the team that long to get through everything. But you submitted a survey with the game link, how many people you had in your team, who those people were, and a plan for future updates as well. I don't know what they do with that information, but I guess if you submitted something that was pretty broken, but you could just about see the potential, if you then tell them some of the updates, maybe they factor that in and sort of, you know, still reward that creativity and that ambition.
With the theme First Contact, and I guess this is sort of, for me, it's similar to how you got it, because I've just been told about it now. It's sort of marinated in my mind.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking something to do with extraterrestrial life or aliens.
I think that was definitely the common take that I saw across a lot of submissions. And we thought the same. So the day of the challenge, we narrowed it down a little bit, took away the risk, took away the, you know, I talked about the puzzles and the obby being a bit of a risk depending on how much you can build. We narrowed it down to that bomb battle game and the raft survival game, both ones that were continuous gameplay that could go on forever. And we then waited for 6 p.m. anxiously. As soon as 6 p.m. came around, ping on the dev forum, the theme is First Contact, and we think, this is fantastic. This is so good, because in our bomb game, the teams were separate and would blast through walls to make First Contact. We then decided that the winning move would be to reach the enemy's base. So you have to meet them, get past them, and get to their base first to contact the other one's base. And then we thought, triple down, astronauts versus aliens, right? Like First Contact, bring the aliens in just in case. But we felt like there was that triple option on the bomb battle side. And on the raft side, I talked about you starting on an individual raft and you might encounter others at sea, First Contact. And again, there's some sort of evil thing in the water that's trying to get you. And you could build that up like a bit of a horror. You don't immediately see the enemy. It sort of is a bit of a jump scare at some point. And again, First Contact. So there was a lot of ways that we could fit it into those two ideas. Ultimately, we went with the bomb battle one, just because I didn't want to faff about with waves and water, because me being me, and being an engineer, I would have wanted to simulate the water perfectly and think about all the hydrodynamics. And I think for 72
and then 71 hours will be gone.
Exactly. So we thought, let's keep it simple. Let's blow up some walls. Yeah, let's use the CSG cutting APIs to like blow holes in walls depending on where you've placed your bomb, and the physics of all those pieces falling out on the floor, along with power-ups were like going to come out of the wall as you blew it up. So that felt like quite a nice thing to do. And it's just that classic Roblox round-based game. You've got a lobby, you've got a countdown timer, 2 teams spawn, and you battle it out. And that felt like a really, really nice thing to do.
That sounds like a really, really good interpretation of the theme, to be honest. I didn't think you'd be able to adapt your, because when you were talking about it, I was like, oh, he's planned this and he doesn't know it's going to be aliens. What's he going to do? But I think you've adapted that really well, taking that First Contact in 2 different ways. But it does sound like quite a bit of a challenge, especially if you're sleeping, eating, 3 days. So how did you get on over that 3 days? And do you have any falling out? Or?
I don't think we had any falling out. The way that we set it up, so you could obviously do this with people remote that you live nowhere near. For this particular one, we could co-locate. So we put both of our desks back to back in my living room, and connected directly to the Wi-Fi via Ethernet. And you could literally just peer over your monitor and just be like, "Oh, I've got an idea," and talk about it. And that free-flowing communication helped a lot, because you could constantly see what the other person's up to and vice versa. Played into motivation as well to see someone working the whole time. And you could remind each other, I can get lost in the code. The plan of actually eating and sleeping, I could very easily just blow past and ignore. But if you're both there, you can be like, we're getting tired, we're making silly mistakes, whatever. Let's sleep for a bit and come back. So that's kind of our strategy going into it, and I think that helped quite a lot. But I think, to be honest, you're too focused on just getting your game done. There's no time for arguing. One of the good things was, because we had very distinct roles and distinct skills, there was literally like zero overlap. I was very much programming and UI, know nothing about modeling. They were very much modeling and texturing, know nothing about programming and UI. So we kind of just split the tasks up. We were fairly even with the tasks that we had to do, although it helped to have more ideas than you could fit in 72 hours, and having to bump stuff out meant that like no one was waiting around for the other person, because there was always stuff to work on. But it went pretty well. We did finish it. And I'm very proud of that. I think, again, I wouldn't have been too sad if we hadn't, because first game jam, literally not done it before. But we prioritized, the Friday was getting the bomb mechanic working, blowing up the walls. The Saturday was getting that into the place. In fact, no, I didn't get that into place Saturday. Sorry. I made that demo Friday and left it. Saturday was get the maze working. So it actually ended up being a maze for the map, with walls being generated that would, some of them destructible, some of them permanent, some just open gaps. And that was Saturday. And Sunday was kind of bringing the two together, with the power-ups and the bombing of the walls. So yeah, I think we managed to split it up just about good enough. Monday we saved for all of our nice to haves. We did not get to many of those nice to haves, and they absolutely got pushed out.
That is a great strategy.
Sunday.
Have something that you can submit by Friday.
Exactly.
And then by Sunday, sorry.
Try and get something submittable by Sunday. We went into Sunday with half of our Saturday tasks still in progress, went into Monday with half our Sunday tasks still in progress, but it meant that when we'd closed off those Sunday tasks, we had a submittable thing. I think, to be honest, we had a submittable thing at the start of Monday, but it was just adding that extra sauce. Things like animating when a power-up was being recharged, like you could see how long it had left by a bar that was filling up. Those kind of things were Monday jobs, and you could have submitted without those, really. But yeah, I think that was our strategy, and that I would recommend to someone else to do, is to plan out Friday's your really, really core stuff. Your riskiest thing Friday. So for me, that was cutting holes out of walls with CSG, because I hadn't done that before. So Friday, get your riskiest thing de-risked, and then Saturday, get some core mechanics together, get the core game loop. Sunday, integrate everything together with some of the modeling or whatever else is going on, so that you've got something playable. Monday, if you've got time, the nice to haves. That would be my advice. and it worked this time.
Your normal development process, I understand, is probably Git. I presume you use Git. I mean, you're a professional software engineer in your day job, yes. So I presume you use Roho, TypeScript.
Yeah, let's talk about the technologies. I started off.
I'm interested if you rushed, basically, or did you sort of continue with like the almost perfectionist system that I sometimes find myself falling victim to?
It was a tough challenge to try and suppress that as much as possible, but I did still use Git. I started off with branches and PRs, right? Like insane. Probably should have just abandoned that from the get-go. But what I was using was CodeRabbit, which is an AI code reviewer, because I didn't have anyone else to look at my code, and I knew there'd be mistakes that I put in there, just silly stuff that I wouldn't know until I played with 5 people, and then suddenly, multiplayer's broken because I just didn't think about something. So I was submitting code and raising PRs for each of my tasks that I had, and implementing CodeRabbit's feedback, and like it did help me spot probably 3 or 4 things that I would have found out Monday and freaked out about. So that was quite good. I think it was probably the end of Saturday where that started breaking down, and it was just one branch. I was still committing and still pushing to make sure that if my computer died, I had at least something and could switch to a different computer. But yeah, I was working in an external IDE, external editor, pushing to Git. I wrote it all in TypeScript, and that's just because that was what I was familiar with right now. My bowling game, The Lanes, is all written in TypeScript and React for the UI. And I did declare this on the submission survey. I took essentially the framework around that, including like data saves and various other things that sort of are just stuff I didn't want to have to worry about during the game jam, and put that into what we were doing here and just cleared it out, literally started from scratch with the UI and a few other bits and pieces, but had some framework in place of how server and client would communicate, how data would be saved. And so for me, that was just the quickest thing. And also with TypeScript, it won't build if your types don't all add up. And that felt like a good thing to do in the game jam to help eliminate mistakes and
it can be counterintuitive the way it saves time, because then you don't have to run and then realize that, oh, I've typed this wrong, and then go back. Exactly. You mentioned CodeRabbit. I'm wondering, are there any other AI tools that you used in your development? Because like short time span, what's AI good at? Generating code very quickly. And was CodeRabbit actually useful to you?
So there were 3 AI tools that my team used. I used 2, and the other person used 1. So I used CodeRabbit for reviewing the code, and it did find some mistakes, and I find it's much better with TypeScript than it is with Lua. So another pro in the column of using TypeScript. Sometimes it gets confused because Roblox TypeScript is a bit different to normal TypeScript, but I've just about got my CodeRabbit to learn enough things. Every time I tell it, nope, Roblox TS is different, it remembers that. And so from me using it on the lanes, it had already got some of that knowledge coming in. So it found 3 or 4 bugs before I did, and it did help improve the code a little bit, but I wasn't too bothered about nitpicks and stuff. I used Windsurf as my IDE, when I was asking it questions, it was Gemini Pro 3, high thinking, but when you're just typing, it sort of auto-completes and does stuff as well. I'm not sure what model it uses for that. That was helpful for just helping fill out some of the boilerplate that you sometimes have with TypeScript. If you'd just written a remote event over here and then switched to a different script to implement it, it would just fill that out because it knew the context of what you just edited before. So that sped things up quite a bit, and I'm used to using that in my day job and on Roblox as well. So that was pretty useful. There was a time when I was trying to figure out the maze algorithm, and this is where stuff started getting a bit delayed. And thankfully, this was the start of Saturday because, again, it was a risky thing. But I wanted to generate the map from one base to the other, and you would sort of cross paths in the middle, the 2 teams. And I wanted to make sure that there was at least one possible path from one base to another through destructible walls or just empty space. And then generate a few extra paths that were possible as well. And it just turns out that creating a maze is hard. Like, I just didn't quite realize, and I did do decision maths, but we're talking 10 years ago now. I did decision maths at A-level, right? And Dijkstra's algorithm was floating around somewhere in my head, but it wasn't quite there. There was a couple others that are used for mazes. And so I basically said, Gemini, make me this maze algorithm. I'm using Roblox TS, write it here. And it did not do a good job. It generated something that created the paths, but they were just a straight path from one base through to the other. And I was like, what is going on? It's generating a straight path. Please help. And then it started trying to edit other stuff in the script that wasn't helping and just was making things worse. And eventually it sort of kind of made it a bit of a wiggly path, but still pretty damn straight. Like you could guess the path it was going to create. And so I just scrapped that and just said I'm hard coding a few paths and I will randomly remove some extra walls afterwards. But you need to cut my losses there. So it was helpful at times. And the third AI tool was Nano Banana Pro through Gemini. And that was what my Game Jam partner was using to generate some references. So imagine we needed to make an alien looking wall with some tentacles coming out of it or something like that. She'd ask for a low poly wall with tentacles coming out of it, that like had some neon details and whatever. Refine that look in Gemini, a 2D image of what she wants, and then over to Blender, sort of interpret that in the context of what we're doing with the dimensions we're working with and all that sort of stuff. So it was used for reference images for low poly 3D models as well. And those were our 3 AI tools. And we didn't end up integrating any runtime AI systems. We just, again, it was a bit of a risk. I have played around with them a tiny bit, but it didn't seem necessary for the theme, for the idea that we were implementing.
If you are really banking on the fact that technology works as they say, as well as they say it does, because you could make your hobby and then you could get to the point where you could have a chatbot, and then you ask the chatbot, and then the chatbot can't actually deliver you something. maybe you have a maze algorithm that you have to write, and then you'd be kind of doomed. You wouldn't be able to get any further.
Exactly, that's it. I was thinking like you could do it, but 4D generation had only just come into the client beta, which means it isn't ready for full release. There could be problems. I have seen it where you ask it to generate something and it takes a minute or more to generate, and you might win the AI prize, but if you lose on engagement, technical quality, like all of those other ones, it seemed like a bit of a risk, and we preferred aiming for 4 out of the 5 categories rather than 1 out of the 5. That felt like a safer bet.
And did you take any inspiration from any winners of previous years? Because I don't know how long this has been around, but I do remember seeing some games which claim to have won prizes or been in competitions. I remember there being one sort of set in a greenhouse where you like jump on things, and it was like a really stunning graphics at the time. I don't know if it was the same competition, but yeah, how long has it been around, and did you take a look at the past runnings of it?
This particular one has been around, I think, at least 2 years prior to this. I know there was a 2024 Dev Challenge. I don't know about before that. I know that Roblox used to do, I think, 24-hour game jams at Roblox Developer Conference, which, having done a 72-hour one, is like, I couldn't imagine doing 24. That's insane. And so I think maybe when they stopped that a year or two later, they started bringing out this developer challenge.
Do you know why they stopped it?
I think they wanted to probably just do a lot more with the conference, because if you give up a whole 24 hours of the weekend to the game jam, I think that's good when it's just developers and creatives. I think now that they've got brands there, they've got investors, they've got all sorts of other people interested in what's going on. They're trying to live stream as much of it as possible, and squeeze every minute of Dave's time and some of the other people's time as possible. I think they just wanted that 24 hours back for the conference, to be fair.
And also, after a 24 hackathon, I mean, I was part of the organising team for Leeds Hack last week, and I just slept. I went to bed and I was in bed for about 14 hours. So you don't really want that at RDC. You want attendance.
If you're there to network with devs, whatever, but then 24 of your hours is locked in with one team doing that, and then a whole bunch more hours is you sleeping. It's like, if you flew all the way to San Francisco for that, it's not very much. But yeah, in terms of inspiration, I'd looked at a few of the previous winners just to kind of understand the theme that was for part of that game jam, so like break the system for last year, and how that was interpreted, just to kind of get a sense of that. But in terms of mechanics, I really didn't want to be too influenced by other games. The person I was working with on this plays a lot of video games, and so they had a lot of ideas in terms of mechanics and in terms of what would work well. I was sort of the technical feasibility person of like, could we actually implement that? But I tried not to be too influenced or swayed by other games. I don't think it would be a bad thing to do that. I think one of the best ways to make a game is play a bunch, feel, think about what you'd want to change, right? You play a game, you're like, oh, this is such a good game, except for this one thing. And so you then iterate on that and make that different. And I think that's a good strategy to come up with games. I just don't really play enough to to have that mindset going into it. I just was creating it as I went, and just whatever felt natural. And that was the other thing. You have to play your game. Like, we made a lot of use of team test in studio. If you're not enjoying your game and it's not fun to play, then how can you possibly expect it to be for other people? So from maybe halfway in onwards, we just played it. Did it feel good? No. What should we change? The bomb doesn't explode quick enough. Let's tweak that to be shorter. You can't throw it far enough. Let's tweak that to be further. Whatever it might be. And that was mostly how I came up with the actual implementation that we went with.
So this must have been a huge time commitment for you. So I'm guessing you want to got something out of it, maybe other than just prizes. What did you learn along the way? And yeah, what have you taken away from it? And are there any valuable lessons that you think might help you further on in your career?
Yeah, it was interesting. I think there's a lot that I learned from it. I think there's a lot that other people could learn from doing game jams as well. I think I probably have like 3 main takeaways that I took from taking part in this 72-hour game jam. And I've probably said 72 hours so many times in this episode. But the first thing was, this was just a lot of fun. This was like the most fun that I've had in 72 hours while like coding and being on my computer, right? I'm old. I'm turning 28 this weekend. And this game jam sort of, it brought back that feeling of childhood sleepover, right? You've given yourself permission to stay up late and be on your computer the whole time, mixed with just like letting your creative energy flow and just make something where the stakes are just really low. Yes, there's a monetary prize, but only 5 teams out of, we said over 1,000 submissions, only 5 of those are going to get that prize. So reality is, first game jam, probably not going to get that prize. So it's just a fun time, and the stakes are low. When you've got a game and you're a game developer, it's scary to experiment on the game that you have. It's scary to try something brand new and not know, is this going to harm my revenue stream? And you might be relying on that revenue stream as your job. Whereas in a game jam, we just put aside 4 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And it was just like, we're going to have fun in these 4 days. If we make something that's playable, amazing. If we win a prize, even more amazing. But even if not, doesn't matter. We'll have learned some stuff. We'll have had fun. And that's enough, I think, to warrant taking part. And so I think that's my first takeaway, was just, it was good fun. My second one was, it was so good for motivation. And like, I now have so many more ideas I want to bring back to my own games. Motivation over that time was like through the roof. I'm actually amazed how much we managed to do in 72 hours. And I think I can sort of liken it to having a gym buddy, or, whatever kind of buddy, to do something that not necessarily you don't want to do, but that you need a bit of extra motivation for, or maybe just this feeling of kind of being in it together. And so, being able to look across at your partner or your teammate's screen and see, wow, they're making some awesome models, like that looks incredible. I need to step up my game and make some awesome features over here, and vice versa, so that, every time they look over, you've got some cool feature to show, and every time you look over at theirs, they've got something cool to show. I think my phone battery lasted like at least the first 2 days, maybe the first 3 days, without needing a charge, because there was no time or desire to go on your phone and doom scroll, or just like sit there and waste the hours away, which I probably would normally do in a normal development day. Like, I'm probably not just sat there constantly working. Because there was just this motivation. Like, yes, we've only got 72 hours, but we're both creating awesome stuff during that time. And at the end of it, a self-esteem boost to have something playable was a fantastic bonus. We talked about the way we structured it in terms of Friday and Saturday. Having something playable so quickly was great. I was nervous beforehand because I'd never done this type of thing with a blank slate. and made something that I'm actually happy with and happy to publish in such a short time before. So just all round that motivation, ideas that you can then take back to your established project, or if you're a new dev, maybe that inspires you to go into it properly and make game development your thing.
Yeah, I do relate to that sort of in-person co-working, or it's like a sprint together feeling, because I do that sometimes with my team, and we're mostly remote. We live pretty far apart from each other. But sometimes we just get the train and just sit in a cafe, and it's like we only get 2 hours done, but it's like the most productive 2 hours that I've done all month. And yeah, it was there anything else that you took away?
Yeah, there was sort of one more aspect, and I think that was sort of just an important skill and an important approach to projects, that I think I want to apply to anything new, which is this game jam, and any game jam is time limited. And that forces you to really pare down your idea, like really, really pare down your idea to the absolute core mechanic. And because of that risk of not wanting to leave stuff to the end, the fact that Friday was like, let's just get the core mechanic working, Saturday, let's get the game loop working. I think I'm going to do that for all new projects. Like, even if there isn't a time pressure, just really strip away all the niceties, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to spend ages working on high fidelity scenery and lots of polish, and then your game's not actually fun. No one actually enjoys the core mechanic, and it's so much harder to edit that core loop if you've built so much around it and so much polish, and it's all quite, bloated at that point. Whereas the type of stuff that we did Friday, Saturday, if it wasn't fun, we could have changed it in a couple of hours. It's not weeks of undoing months of work. It's a couple of hours undoing what we did last night. Like, it's a very, very different way of approaching that, and being willing to put something out there that isn't 100% polished. But people don't need high fidelity stuff to enjoy your core game loop. That's just a nice to have afterwards to keep them there for longer. So yeah, I think the skill, the approach is get an MVP, proof of concept type thing for your game, for the core mechanic out as fast as possible. And if people enjoy it, build on it after that point. That's kind of my biggest takeaway, I think, at least professionally, that you can apply.
Yeah, I think that's a great message for new developers, or even experienced developers like yourself. Some of us got relatively big or medium games by accident, and maybe forget that the core principles that your game needs to be fun. So developing an MVP really is great advice. And yeah, but unfortunately, that is all that we have time for today. But thank you, Adam. I've really enjoyed hearing about your experience at Roblox Developer Challenge this year, and we hope that you viewers enjoyed it too.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely try and take part if you can. Big developer, small developer, I think it's worthwhile for anyone.
Be sure to like, share, let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you entered the Roblox Developer Challenge, we would love to hear. If you've entered a hackathon or a game jam before, we'd love to hear about it.
Beyond the Box is produced by Seb Jensen for Last Level Studios. Watch on YouTube or Spotify, listen wherever you get your podcasts, and catch updates every week on TikTok or Shorts. Visit lastlevel.co.uk/podcast for more.